So hello everyone, welcome to some big seaweed search training. I've had a few requests to video a session, so I thought I'd just record one and then you can share it at your leisure. So in terms of big seaweed search, what we're going to talk about is a quick introduction into what is the big seaweed search, some top tips on how to get involved and what we are asking people to do. And then a bit about what happens next. So what happens to that data? Where does it go? How do we use it? And then obviously, finally, we're going to introduce seaweeds. So I'll be introducing some top tips on how to identify the different species of seaweeds. So first things first, I thought I'd go into a bit of a background about where the project came from. And it was actually the brainchild of Professor Juliet Brodie. So Juliet is a merit researcher. Her speciality is in seaweed, and she currently works at the Natural History Museum. And the project was set up in 2009. And in 2016, Marine Conservation Society joined as a partner in that project in the Big Seaweed Search. So there is myself, my name's Amy Pillsbury, so I am Citizen Science Programme Developer for Marine Conservation Society, and then my equivalent at the Natural History Museum is Jessica Wardlaw as well. And then outside of this, there are lots of other people involved in the Big Seaweed Search team. So we have all our wonderful VCEM, so our volunteer and community engagement officers, all around the UK. And those guys are on the ground conducting big seaweed searches. So if there is anybody that would like to get in touch with a coordinator in your area, then please do contact us. I will share at the end of this presentation all of the links you need and some useful email addresses too. So please do get in touch. But yes, just to say, there's definitely lots and lots of other people involved behind the scenes at the Big Seaweed Search. So I guess if we start at the beginning, why is it important to record seaweeds and why are they important for us as humans as well? And there's lots of different reasons, which I'll get to shortly. But just a quick intro to seaweeds. There are over 12,000 known species all around the world, and 650, actually just over 650 now, species are found around the UK. So that's about 7% of the total amount of known species are found in UK waters, which makes us a really great place to study seaweeds. They've existed on the planet for over 200 million years, and generally they're broken down into these three groups. So you have brown seaweeds, red seaweeds, and green seaweeds. And obviously, just as they say on the tin, the colour is the key indication there. And we'll get into specific seaweeds and also talk a little bit more about colours as well of seaweeds. So in terms of why they're useful, they've got lots and lots of uses. So lots of uses for humans, lots of uses for marine life, but also the planet as a whole. Seaweed is so important. So in terms of food, medicines and products, there are some people that will eat seaweed, but equally we use seaweed for lots of other things as well. So animal feed is another big thing in the farming industry. A lot of animal feeds are made out of seaweed. We have medicines that are made out of seaweed. So things like cosmetics, toothpaste as well has seaweed in. And then other products too. So things like fertilizers, also biofuels could often be made out of seaweeds. So there's lots and lots of cool things that we can do with seaweed. And by no means is that list exhausted yet. There's constantly new developments in things we can do with seaweed. And in terms of other things that they do for us, so protecting our coastline. So that is mostly from wave damage, storm damage. They act as a really great buffer between the sea and the land and help us kind of minimise coastal erosion. So they do a great job of protecting our coastline. The two over on the right here almost go hand in hand. So blue carbon, which is a term you may or may not have heard before. Blue carbon is basically all the marine kind of plants that live out in the sea, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And as those plants die and decay and sink to the bottom, they take the carbon with them and lock it away. So you might have heard it called carbon sequestration sometimes, but equally we call it blue carbon. And then the other side of that is, as well as absorbing all the carbon dioxide from our atmosphere, plants are obviously great at creating oxygen. So seaweeds are really great at producing oxygen to help us breathe. There's lots of research out there that suggests that they actually produce more oxygen than the plants on land. So they do a fantastic job for us, help us to breathe, help absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere too. So in terms of being highly diverse, as we said, there's lots and lots of different species. There's probably some that we don't even know about yet out there in the world. And they have lots of different uses. So I'm sure we haven't got to the end of seaweed research by any means yet. And then finally, providing habitat. So obviously they're great at creating wonderful underwater ecosystems. There's lots of things that like to live in them. They act as nursery grounds. They are food for a lot of animals as well, a lot of marine animals. So lots of really important uses for seaweed, and it's definitely one of the world's biggest superheroes. And now we'll go into a bit more about specifically why we're interested in researching seaweed. So what are we actually looking for? And I'll mention now, although I will talk about them a bit later, we are looking for 14 different species around the UK. So we're not going to get everybody to try and memorise 650 different types of seaweed. We're only looking at 14. And these have been selected because they're really good indicator species. So their presence, absence, or abundance will tell us a lot about what's going on in the marine environment in that area. So to break it down a little bit further, there's 3 different groups that we've split them into, and they indicate a different aspect of climate change, which Juliet uses within her research. So the first one is climate change and sea temperature rise. So around the UK over the past 40 years, there's been roughly a 2 degree increase in sea surface temperature. And you can see this this table here. This is taken from one of Juliet's papers on brown seaweed specifically, but this is looking at the change every year. So on an annual basis, this is the percentage of temperature increase. So they might look quite small, but obviously over an extended period of time, that can add up to a 2 degree change. And what this means for seaweed is generally every species of seaweed will have what they prefer to grow in. So they'll have their perfect temperature, they'll have their perfect nutrients, their perfect water conditions. They might like to be in the water more, they might like to be out of the water more. But changes in temperature mean that seaweeds will move or change how they grow, dependent on the conditions. So as a general rule, cold water seaweeds moving further north as they are kind of chasing the cold water further north as the centre of the earth is warming. And warm water species are expanding their range. So they might have a range that they're found in normally, but they're expanding that range as more and more of the ocean warms up. And these are the 8 species which we have chosen to indicate sea temperature rise. So we're kind of looking at these, where these move over time, which will help us indicate what's going on as the sea temperatures are changing. I will talk about all these species later, so that's just kind of a quick picture. So second part is that we're interested in researching is non-native species. So I said earlier there's 650 roughly species of seaweed in the UK, and that actually has increased in the last 5 years. So you can see there from 644 to 656 from 2016. And you can see next to that the percentage of those to which are non-native. So non-native species are those which aren't normally found in the UK. This is outside of what you would consider their normal range. And generally those non-native species have found their way here via shipping methods. So as more and more people are moving around the planet on more and more boats to more and more places, a lot of it due to industry, all of these kind of non-native species can be transported from one place to another. So that may be in ballast tanks. So a lot of large shipping containers, they kind of collect water to help balance if they've got cargo or not, and then they'll dump it somewhere else as they get to their destination and all of the cargo is offloaded. It might also be that they're fouling, so it might be that live seaweeds have grown on the bottom of these boats and they're being transported and falling off in the waves. Lots of different reasons why there might be non-native species that are finding their way to the UK and actually staying here as well. So over the last 5 years, and again, this is taken from one of Juliet's papers, we've got 31 to 39 non-native species in the last 5 years. So again, something we're really interested in tracking, and there are 4 different non-native species that we've chosen here to look at, which we know have arrived in the UK to varying extents over varying times as well. So these are the ones we're keeping track of, and we want to know, now they've arrived, where are they growing? Are they expanding their range? Are they covering the UK? And one of the things with non-native species is that eventually it could be that they outcompete our native species for things like space. If they're a particularly quick growing species like wireweed, it might be that they outcompete them for food or for light as well. And then the final thing that we're interested in is ocean acidification. So ocean acidification, I suppose almost what it says on the tin. So it means that the oceans are becoming more acidic. And that happens when carbon dioxide reacts with water. You can ignore this scientific equation if you like, but basically carbon dioxide reacts with water, produces hydrogen ions, and that is what makes the water become more acidic. And again, referring back to seaweeds, what that means for seaweeds is likewise for temperature, they have their own conditions that they prefer. So they have their own pH levels that they prefer. And if that gets more acidic, it can cause problems with photosynthesis. And for some species that have calcium carbonate almost structure, it can cause lots of problems. I guess one way to think about it, although it maybe is not to this extent, is if you've ever seen the experiment where you put a shell into a pot of vinegar and it dissolves over time. Essentially, on a lesser scale, that is what is happening into the ocean. So not to say that seaweeds are going to dissolve away, but they could struggle to grow. So again, tracking where these specific species are found. Are they decreasing? Are they moving? Can tell us a little bit more about ocean acidification as well. So the species that we're looking for, which indicate ocean acidification, is calcified crusts and coral weed. And again, I'll introduce these a bit more further down the line. So next, and I guess this is kind of the middle of the story here, how to get involved. So how can you help collect data for the Big Seaweed Search? So Big Seaweed Search is what we call a citizen science, or you might have heard it called a community science project. And basically it's a collaborative project with the public and also scientists as well, and organisations such as Marine Conservation Society and National History Museum. So there's lots of different things that go on within this, and obviously the outcomes of that I will talk about a little bit as well. So the first thing is, which is really important to remember just throughout conducting a Big Seaweed Search survey, is to take lots of photographs. So we're very aware that seaweeds can be quite difficult to identify. So we're trying to make it as easy as we can. We've got lots of resources that I can share with you as well shortly. But photographs are really great because it means that if you aren't sure and you've had a great guess, then we can have a look at your photos and we can match them up, and our scientists can match them up and see if they are correct, and then we can use them in our reporting and our research. So take lots and lots of pictures. Okay, so step 1, what you need to do is head to the Big Seaweed Search website and download a Big Seaweed Search guide and a recording form. So the Big Seaweed Search guide has got all the species in. It'll tell you a little bit more about where you're likely to find them, what they look like, some top tips for IDing them, and then a recording form to track what you've spotted. If you haven't got a printer, don't worry, you can email seaweeds@Natural History Museum or nhm.ac.uk with your name and address, and maybe just pop in as well the number of copies that you would like, and we can get some posted out to you. It's also worth noting, if you're in Wales, we've got a bilingual copy as well. So if you would like a bilingual copy, they are downloadable from Marine Conservation Society website, and they are also available if you want to email too. So although we obviously want everyone to have a great time at the beach, it's important to make sure that you're staying safe. So the first thing you definitely want to do before you get to the beach is check the tide times. Now, when conducting a Big Seaweed Search survey, it's the best time to do it is an hour before low tide. So as the tide is still going out, that's the best place to start your survey. And that means that the seaweed is primarily out of the water. So some of the lower shore species you'll still be able to see, but the tide's still going out, so you're not in danger. And then when you start your survey, start at the sea and head in towards the beach. And then obviously lots of other things to take note of. So definitely sensible shoes. You'll be walking on slippery seaweed, slippery rocks. So wellies, walking boots, those kind of things. And obviously dress for the weather. If it's as hot as it has been recently, sun cream is probably very important. But equally, if it's cold, take yourself a nice warm coat and a warm drink to warm up afterwards. Make sure you wash your hands. If you do spot any animals or other living creatures, make sure you pop them back where you found them. And as well, obviously, with the seaweeds, just be really careful. So we're recording seaweeds that are attached, so try not to obviously unattach them because they are still growing. Again, I can share this risk assessment type image here. And also worth noting, if you're taking a group with you, we do have a pack which you can download, which will have a full risk assessment in, which is downloadable on our website also. Next thing is to select your survey area. So you can see the picture over there on the left. It goes perpendicular to the sea, and you want to pick a 5 metre transect. And we don't have to be precious about 5 metres, just 5 paces will do. And if you mark those out with some items, or you can use natural landmarks if there's anything there to look at, and mark out a 5 metre wide strip which stretches from the sea all the way up to the top of the shore. And then you want to fill in section 1, which is a bit more information about your shore. So it'll ask about the substrate. Is it sandy? Is it rocky? It also asks you about, is there any rock pools in the area? So just fill that part in. And then also don't forget to take a picture. So it's a really great visual for our scientist team to have a look at exactly what the conditions were where you were undertaking your survey. And then the most exciting part, get seaweed spotting. So we are asking for a presence or absence. So what I would do is have a look at your survey plot, again, starting from the sea end, heading up towards the beach, and see what you can find. So have a look around. You'll need to get your hands probably a little bit slippery and slimy, and mark whichever ones you found as present. And then also, if you can try and classify how much of it there was. So is it band forming? So is it stretching across the whole of your 5 metre plot? Is it just little patches here and there that you come across? Or is it sparse? You might only find 1 or 2 patches within your survey area. And again, there's a little tick box there for that. And then take any pictures of identifying features. So if you think it might be a bladder rack and you spot it's got a nice gas bladders on there, you might want to take some pictures of that to attach with your record. But yeah, as many pictures as you can would be brilliant. And then obviously you can tick anything you didn't find as absent at the end as well. And then step 5, which is our final step, is to upload your results onto the Big Seaweed Search website. So it's www.bigseaweedsearch.org. Equally, you can email your form and pictures as well to seaweeds@nhm.ac.uk. And it's very similar to the paper form. So it'll ask you, was it present or absent? Was it band forming, patchy or sparse? And then there's a little upload button to add your photos there as well. If you have a mobile phone, you can do this on the shore with your mobile phone too. And then what happens next? So where does that mysterious data go once you've submitted it? So your survey data will appear on an online map. So it looks just like this one over on the right here. So these are all the surveys that have been conducted so far. And our scientists will go through and have a look and confirm what you've spotted. So they'll use your pictures, match it to what you wrote down on your form, and then it will go straight into our database to be used in scientific research. And so far, this is from June 2021 to May 2022, so quite up to date, but these are the results from last year. We had 160 surveys with 587 amazing seaweed searchers who spent 27 days searching for seaweed, so a really long time spent last year having a look for seaweed. And it's gone into, like I said, our database, and that is really great to collect over time. Because it means that we can track changes and we can follow things as they move. But also we've used them for lots of different research papers. So that we have 3 published at the moment, so they're due to be published relatively soon. One being a red data list. So a red data list assessment is basically, we had a look at all of the different species of seaweed and classified those as to whether they were endangered, so they're quite rare to find in the UK, whether they are vulnerable to extinction, so they might not be found here in X amount of years, or it might be that they're of something we call least concern, which means that generally they're doing quite well as a population around the UK. So 1,000 data points so far, so 1,000 different points from our seaweed surveys, like the ones that you guys are conducting, have been used in this red data list assessment, which is due to be released soon. We also have a paper coming out on just the whole of our data set. So over the last 10, 20, what are we at now? 13 years? That was very slow maths by me. We have a nice paper coming out on that. And then we've also been looking at some of the benefits that our lovely citizen scientists, our seaweed searchers, get from taking part in a big seaweed search as well. So we've got some exciting citizen science work in the progress as well. So all this data is really important for us and for research. So this again is the same time frame, so June 2021 to May 2022. And these are the surveys that we found. So in this map, you can see where the surveys are. And the size of the circle replicates how many surveys were done in that area. And the colour of the circle is how many seaweed species were found there. So you can see down on the southwest coast there, there's some survey sites where you actually find 9 or 10 of the 14 different species of seaweed, which is really exciting. And then this lovely graph here is the number of species we found. So of all the seaweeds that were spotted all around the country, 18.2% of those were serrated wrack, and likewise that goes down. So you can see at the bottom there is wakame, which is a non-native seaweed, and 0 were found in that time period last year. So that's technically good news because it shouldn't be here anyway. But yeah, good to know what we spotted last year. And now for a quick part of Meet the Seaweeds. So there's lots of different seaweeds, as I said, we're recording 14. There is a video. I'm not going to play it in this recording, but what I'll do is I'll share the link to the video alongside this recording so that you have it as well. And we're just going to skip past that and we're going to go straight on to introducing some of the species. So we're starting with the species that are great indicators of sea temperature rise. And what you'll see on each side is a map, which is generally where they're found around the UK. So it might give you some of an idea, for example, on dabbleox. If you are over in the southeast and you think you've spotted dabbleox, definitely take some pictures because it's not to say they aren't found there. It's just that they have not been found there just yet. So you might be the first to spot a dabbleox over in the southeast. So again, pictures will help us with that one. So dabbleox is a brown seaweed. It's quite long and narrow and strap-like, and you'll notice this distinctive midrib all the way up the blade, and the blade is what we call the leaf part of the seaweed. And you'll see at the bottom as well, so on the stipe, which is the stem part, so something similar to a plant stem, it's called a stipe in seaweed, will have these really long, funny-looking finger-like structures stretching out from the stipe. So one to look out for. Quite a big seaweed, they get to 1.5 metres around the UK. Next, this one may be one that people is familiar with. Sometimes people eat sugar kelp. It's often farmed around the UK as well. So we actually have started growing this specifically for things like animal feed. And again, it's a really long seaweed. So again, 1.5 centimetres. It's got really, really long blades, but different to dabbleox, this one doesn't have a distinctive midrib. So it does not have a really distinct line running up the middle. Instead, it tends to be quite wrinkly and funny looking. And at the bottom, you'll see the thing there that looks a little bit like roots. So in seaweed, we call that a holdfast, and that's the part obviously that attaches it to the substrate, so to the rock or to the seabed, wherever it may be. And in sugar kelp, that does really look like a root system. Imagine a typical plant root. That's exactly what it looks like in sugar kelp. And sugar kelp's found pretty much all around the UK. Quite a big brown seaweed. So rated wrack. Now, this is where we get into the good stuff, because some people have done a really good job of naming their seaweeds here, and a lot of these are what they say on the tin. So serrated wrack has serrated edges. And if you look really closely and spot a patch of brown, sometimes it's olivey green type colour. If you have a look around the edge, if you've got a zigzag edge just like this, then it's pretty much going to be serrated wrack. They can get to 60 centimetres. They're found pretty much all around the UK. It's quite likely that you will see some serrated wrack. Bladder wrack. So again, another one that is what it says on the tin here. It's got some lovely little gas bladders. So these gas bladders are really useful for seaweeds, and lots of seaweed species have them. And it means that they can float when they go underwater and help to keep them near the surface so they can photosynthesize. Bladder wrack, what I would say is that this is one that varies quite a lot in colour. So you can find some that are almost black, but equally you can find some that are this olivey green, like the picture in the centre there. But bladder wrack will always have paired gas bladders. So they might sit directly next to each other or just slightly off from each other, but they'll always be in pairs. So that's a really good indication that you're looking at a bladder wrack. And again, they're pretty common and can be found all around the UK. So one you are, again, quite likely to see. Now, knotted wrack. So this is almost the exact opposite of bladder wrack. Instead of having paired gas bladders, these guys have single gas bladders. So they've got really long strap-like fronds. They're quite leathery looking, and they have single, quite large gas bladders at intervals along those fronds, and sometimes at the end as well, as you can see there. So quite a big seaweed again, brown, generally brown or olive coloured, can be found all around the UK. You might have sometimes heard that called egg wrack too. Spiral wrack, another interesting one. Again, it grows in a spiral. Good work, scientists, for naming that one. So you'll see in that top picture, the leaves tend to spiral as they grow. So that's why it's called spiral wrack. You'll notice as well that they look like they have gas bladders, but just to confuse us all, these are at the end of the seaweeds normally, and they are not gas bladders. They're actually goo-filled, these ones, and they're the reproductive bodies of this seaweed. So if you see any with these goo-filled bladders at the end, that's them reproducing. And the goo-filled bladders also have a really distinctive rim around the edge. So if you have a closer look, you'll spot it almost looks like two halves been put together with a nice distinctive rim around the edge. And again, found all around the UK. That one is spiral wrack. And now we get to channeled wrack. So channeled wrack, as it says, it's got a really deep grooved channel that runs down each frond. So it's almost like they're rolled in on each other. And the other thing to note is they've got forked ends as well. So normally evenly forked, a bit like a snake's tongue at the end of each of those branches of seaweed. Again, olive colour, generally quite a lot lighter, but sometimes you can get brown ones also, and a bit smaller than some of the other species, but quite robust looking. And again, keep an eye out for that really rolled channel that you can see down the middle of the fronds there. Found all around the UK as well, like one you might spot. Thongweed. So thongweed has no pockets or gas bladders, and thongweed's really, really long and strap-like. So generally you'll find a kind of a big clump of it together. It looks like spaghetti stretching out through the water. I like that picture there over on the left. But when they start to grow, thongweed are actually these tiny little buttons that you can see in these pictures over on the right. So you might see them kind of starting to grow as well. So you might spot these little buttons, and that can still be recorded as thongweed. And then eventually a strap will grow out the centre of those little buttons. Again, found most places around the UK. A little bit of a data gap here. Look on the east coast, so it could be that there's some there. It might be that they're moving into that area. So although you might not be likely to see it, if you think you spotted it, definitely get some pictures of it. And now we move into our non-native species. So these are ones that have been found here maybe over the last couple of years or so. So wireweed, this one grows quite quickly, and often you'll find it in rock pools. And it does actually have gas bladders, but you have to look really, really closely. They're teeny, teeny, tiny, and they're dotted all along the seaweed fronds. So again, quite a stringy looking seaweed, but definitely you will spot these tiny, tiny little air bladders that look a little bit like seeds almost all the way along. And you'll spot on the map there, at the moment, they're found all around the south coast, all along the west coast, lots around Ireland as well. And there's been a couple of sightings down the east coast. So one to look out for sure if you spot them down the east coast. Wakame, so again, a bit more rare to find around the UK, but they're definitely here and potentially expanding their range. So very, very big seaweed. You can see these really big leaf-like fronds that they've got. And they have quite a distinctive stipe. So the kind of stem part, again, is this really funny concertina-y looking thing. So you can see at the bottom in this middle picture, they've got a funny looking concertina, which you might spot. And then they also have on their fronds at the bottom these finger-like structures. So similarly to dabbleox, they have these finger shapes. In dabbleox, the fingers are more likely to be from the stipe, so coming out of the stipe rather than on the fronds themselves. Harpoonweed, so again, another non-native species to the UK, found on the south coast, west coast, spreading up all around the top of Scotland there. And they have these little harpoon-like structures, so you might have to have a really close look at these. They are generally quite a small species of seaweed, but if you can spot these harpoon little spikes on their branches, then you're probably looking at harpoonweed. And equally Bonomason's hookweed, so again, found along the west coast, up into Scotland quite a lot at the moment. Less likely on the east coast, although there has been some sightings down there. And they have this really obvious curved hook, so you can see it there in the picture, as well as little harpoons. So sometimes can be confused with harpoonweed, but keep your eyes peeled for these curly, whirly big hooks. And then we get into species that indicate ocean acidification, so calcified crusts. And this is the funny one because it doesn't look like a seaweed at all, but we promise it's a seaweed. It looks a bit like chewing gum stuck to rocks. And you'll see that it varies in colour as well. So it can be anywhere from kind of a darkish red colour up to a really, really light, almost white pink colour. And you'll notice that sometimes you'll spot if two individuals have joined together, they create like a ridge almost. So you might see a bit of a colony developing across the rocks here. And then finally, we have coral weeds. So again, one that indicates ocean acidification. And coral weeds have these tiny little segments. So it might look a little bit like hookweed, but if you have a look really closely, you'll notice that it's made up of these teeny tiny segments along their branches. They're also quite gritty as well. So when you feel them, you can roll them between your fingers and they feel very, very firm, actually. They're quite robust, coral weed. And something to note as well, if you do spot one of these red seaweeds and you aren't sure, a lot of the time they're easier to identify if they're in water. So again, don't pick them. Obviously, we want you to record species that are attached to rocks, but if you are near rock pools, try and fan them out into the water and have a closer look. You might be able to spot some of these features there. And the other thing that will help as well is where you find them on the shore. So some species like channeled rat, so this picture on the third one in on the top row there, channeled rat can spend up to 8 hours out of the water and be quite happy. So you might find these on the higher shore, a bit further away from the tide line, whereas other species like to keep nice and wet, so you might find them a bit closer to the lower shore in the rock pools and things like that. And again, we can share this diagram as well. So, and within the guide, actually, it does say where you're likely to find them, upper shore, mid shore, or lower shore. So that'll give you a good indication too as to where you might spot them. So there's two that, or four maybe, that we kind of know are very difficult to identify because they do look quite similar. So we've put some more pictures here, and I have already mentioned them. So dabbleox and wakame. And again, if you have a look at the map, that might help you out a little bit because wakame is not found everywhere. Likewise, dabbleox isn't found over in the southeast very often. So you can see these finger-like structures, and in wakame, they come off. Sorry, wakame is the picture over on the right there, as those two brown seaweeds. Wakame has these finger-like structures which are more part of the frond, whereas dabbleox has these finger-like structures which are more part of the stipe. They come off a bit lower. And then Bonomason's hookweed, again, just keep your eyes peeled for that big hook part. So if you think it's harpoonweed, have a close look, see if you can spot any of these big curly whirly hooks, and just double check that it isn't Bonomason's hookweed. And then there's some other species as well. So obviously we're only looking for 14 different types, but there's lots of other things out there that can just confuse us all over the place. And it happens to everybody. So there's anemones, which you might spot. And if you have a look at that bottom left picture there, that's often what they look like when they're out of the water. So if the tide's gone out, they might look like these funny little gooey blobs that you'll spot on the water. And then when they go back underwater, they open themselves out, and that's how they start to feed. But things like snake-lock anemones can get quite big, and they are generally a greeny colour, an olive colour, and do look a little bit like thongweed. So keep your eyes peeled for snake-lock anemones. They'll see these long tentacles coming out of almost a central point. And then you've got some other seaweed species. So sea lettuce, which is this green species of seaweed. Now, in the seaweed search survey, we don't record any green species. We all have brown or red species. So if you're something that you think that is definitely green, looks like this sea lettuce, then you don't need to record it for us. But saying that, iNaturalist is another website who would be really interested in hearing about your sightings of any of these other things. So if you do want to record some, take some pictures by all means and report them to iNaturalist. Lava, again, another brown, stringy looking seaweed. It can be very easily confused with some of the brown seaweeds that we record too. And then some fun things that you might spot. So you might spot some blennies within the rock pools and also some common prawns. So keep your eyes peeled, but again, just make sure you're careful to return them to where they were found. And then we've got a couple of things which might be able to help you with identifying. So we have a photo identification key. So this is something exactly like what scientists use, and it basically starts really broad with some big questions like, is it brown or is it red? And then it will filter you out into, does it have gas blood? Does it have branches? You know, does it have a serrated edge? And hopefully help you a little bit find out what species you are. And it's worth noting that we're just trialing that at this point. So I will share the link for it. Please feel free to give us your feedback on it. And see how it works for you. And then we also have a Meet the Scientist event, which is on the 8th of August, 6 to 7 p.m. And you can register for that on our Eventbrite link as well. Again, I'll share the link once while I share the recording. So you can register to that. And Juliet will be joining us on that, and we'll be looking at some of the things we found from our big seaweed search week, which is the 23rd to the 31st of July. So if you head out and submit your survey, it's likely you're going to have your results included in that session. We'll share some pictures, and there'll be a chance to ask Juliet some questions about what she's going to do with the data as well. And finally, happy seaweed searching. So hopefully you'll feel a little bit more confident in getting out there and conducting a seaweed search. As always, we're happy to see your pictures, so tag us on social media with Big Seaweed Search, or at our Marine Conservation Society account or a Natural History Museum account. And yeah, ask us lots of questions, enjoy yourselves, get out there in the sunshine, be safe as well once you're out there. And what I would do is I'll share all the links to all the things I promised, so the resources, the videos, the quiz links. I'll share them all with this recording, so hopefully you have the complete set to go out there and get involved. And just to note too, we also have some in-person live events where we are our volunteer managers will be out and about around the country conducting big seaweed search surveys. So I'll share the events link, and if you want to join up and go along to any of those, then you're more than welcome to. And I think that is it. So finally, just to say thank you everybody for attending. Thanks for listening, and happy seaweed search surveying.